The floods in Pakistan have highlighted a complex issue: how low-income countries that contribute less to climate change are bearing the brunt of its impacts. Take the Horn of Africa, for example: Kenya, Somalia, Ethiopia. According to the UN, that region is about to enter a 5th drought season. That's causing nearly 50 million people to suffer from food insecurity. Couple all of this with some precarious political structures, and the future in many of these countries looks iffy at best. Joining us now are Dr. Farah Naureen, Director for Pakistan at Mercy Corps. She's with us from the Pakistani capital of Islamabad. Also with us is Professor Stephen Clemens. He teaches Earth, Environmental, and Planetary Sciences at Brown University. Good to see both of you. And Dr. Naureen, I wonder if I could start with you and how Pakistan is doing right now in terms of just trying to deal with all of these multi-part crises that it's dealing with.
Yes, thank you very much. The thing is, this disaster unfolded before our eyes over a period of 2.5 months, and with unstoppable rains across the country, but more so in areas which do not see this kind of rain in the monsoons normally. A lot of other events happened that have really complicated the situation in different parts of the country. We cannot say that this is a uniform disaster across the country in each area. Each area has its specific needs. The situation is different, and the response to those needs has to be different as well. In the south, especially, we see a very, very large population displaced. Many of them are in organized camps, but a whole lot of people are pretty much by themselves in makeshift tents by the sides of the roads or any place where they have found safety. So there's a major need here for immediate relief, and also the needs that are developing over time.
Professor Clemens, tell me your outlook on these kinds of extreme monsoons. You did a study last year about how data from previous eons and millennia point to these kinds of storms getting worse. Is what we're seeing in Pakistan what your data were revealing?
Yeah, so the study you're speaking about looked at several 100,000 years of evolution of the South Asian monsoon system. And in this case, we were able to determine that periods of time in the past where you have increased concentration of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere were the same times where you had increased rainfall in South Asia. And we measured that by looking at the salinity, the runoff of the monsoonal-fed rivers into the Bay of Bengal. So yes, these types of increases in monsoonal activity are quite consistent across time.
Dr. Naureen, talk about how Pakistan gets out of this mess, from this literal mess that it's dealing with these monsoonal floods, between what the Pakistani government can do and what other governments need to do. The damage, as we said, is estimated at about $30 billion right now. How much can we rely on Pakistan to do for itself, as opposed to how much that other nations might need to provide assistance?
The first thing to understand is that this is not something that can be addressed immediately or in a short period of time. I think the world needs to be ready for the fact that following the immediate relief, which of course is the biggest priority right now, the recovery and rehabilitation is going to be a very, very long journey, and Pakistan will need support. Even prior to the floods, the country was facing economic instability. Right now, the government, of course, but also the humanitarian organizations, local organizations have really mobilized, and they're present in those areas, and they're trying to respond to the immediate needs of the community. We're also seeing that after the initial UN flash appeal, donor money has been mobilized, but really a lot more is needed to be able to cater to the needs of these populations. And the needs keep on emerging as the situation continues. Displacement in major parts of the country, especially in the south, is going to continue for some time. The water is not receding. It may take months. The places where the water has receded, People have started going back to their homes, but they're finding their houses damaged, their livelihoods gone. So huge needs in those areas as well. For recovery, of course, Pakistan needs to make efforts, but for sure there's need for international aid, and also there's need for continued attention to this this issue, because it has happened this year. The road to recovery is long. It's going to be challenging. It's going to take time, but we don't know what's going to happen in the future. This year's rains have shown the unpredictability of how these climate events can take place.
Professor Clemens, to that point, what should we be thinking about in terms of recovering from storms like this? I mean, what's happening in Pakistan now could very easily be the United States Gulf Coast next time. It could be the Atlantic provinces in Canada this weekend. So there, but for the grace of God. But I don't want to have to keep spending the same money over and over to protect people from the impacts of climate change. I'm from South Florida. I've got family within 10 miles of the coast. So I wonder how we plan for the future, whether we plan where we are or whether we plan to get away from where we are, because climate change is pushing us away from what are now more dangerous parts of the world. How do we think that through?
Well, indeed, Joshua, we need to plan for where we are now, because there are a great many people living in coastal regions that are at risk. And we either plan for where we are now or risk mass migrations into other regions from peoples near the coast. An example of this idea that we're all in the same boat was right here in our backyard a couple of weeks ago. For example, here in Providence, Rhode Island, we got 10 inches of rain in one day. That is phenomenal for here. Our infrastructure is built to withstand big rains, which were 2 inches or 3 inches in a day. So the drainage couldn't handle it. Many of our freeways shut down. It's a microcosm of what's happening in Pakistan, of course. That's much, much worse. But yeah, so what's happening there should be a wake-up call for the remainder of us across the globe. We need to all plan for these types of events to become more impactful and more common over time.
I just want to be clear, Professor, and we're real low on time, but are you saying that we need to plan to harden the areas where we are, or plan to get out of those areas and just acknowledge that climate change is going to make them unlivable?
Well, it depends on what type you're talking about. If you're talking about floodplains and river valleys, it's really hard to plan for floods in river valleys like the Indus River Valley, for example. People live there, they farm there, the infrastructure is there to keep the economy going. That's where the water is. So at that type of level, one needs to plan for staying there, harden the infrastructure.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.